How do you catch a spy? If you're an FBI counterintelligence, this is the game you've been playing for the last 70 years, the cat and mouse game. And today on Deviant Off Script, we're talking to one of the people who played that game, which is actually a really dangerous game, against the Russians, against the Chinese, through the fall of the Soviet Union and into the post-9/11 era. Her name is LaRae Quy, and her job was to keep this government safe from espionage and its secrets from getting into the wrong hands. So get ready for some stories from the dark world of counterintelligence today on Deviant Off Script. LaRae Quy, it's wonderful to have you here today on Deviant. Thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you for asking me, Dan. I'm excited to be here.
I am a big intelligence, counterintelligence, and FBI nerd, so I am happy to and excited to get into your career and your adventures and sort of the things that you did that you're able to talk about. And I understand there's some things you may be able to talk about. There's some things you may not be able to talk about. And also, what you've done in your post-career years, in the realm of like helping people with mental toughness and making themselves more resilient.
Yes.
And we always like to start with how you got into what you got into. And you were with the FBI for 23 years?
24, almost 25 years.
24 years.
It was truly, really by accident. Like many young people, I just got out of college and had a degree and had really no idea what I wanted to do. I had a degree in business and I thought, well, okay, the world of retail. I grew up on a cattle ranch in Wyoming, very remote. And, jeans and boots were all I had ever worn. So when I had the opportunity to work at a fancy department store, I thought, oh man, this is going to be wonderful. But I just found, and I'm not knocking retail, but for me, it just wasn't edifying. It didn't really fill any kind of need in me. So I actually went back to get my master's degree at Arizona State University. And while I was there, the FBI was interviewing for agents. And I thought, what the heck? What have I got to lose? So I signed up, and this really great guy named Denny interviewed me. And I think what he really liked and what the FBI liked about me was I grew up unspoiled. I wasn't privileged. I wasn't pampered, So, and that was needed in my job because they needed somebody who could really just jump in and get the job done. I think that's what they really recognized in me. So I got in almost immediately. And
just to put it in sort of a time and place, like Arizona, but we're talking, mid-'80s or so,
yes.
like is when...
Yes, that's exactly right. So within 6 months, I was in the academy. And, if you like the military and you like sports and that kind of thing, you probably would love the FBI Academy. And I did fine in firearms and I did fine in the legal and the rest of it, but I was not an athlete. I was that 1% that makes the 99% possible. So that was tough. I'll have to say, getting through the academy for me was really hard. And when you go into the academy and when you're assigned to an office, you're just thrown out there. You don't know what you'll be working. The SAC or special agent in charge is just going to say, okay, I have a need in this area or on this squad, and that's where you're assigned. Slowly but surely, because the FBI's pattern is to kind of transfer you around so that you can kind of find out where you're going to fit. And at first I was in criminal work, and then my second office, I ended up on intelligence squad. And then when I ended up in San Francisco, my third transfer, and these are just automatic. They just do it because they like to see how you're going to react when things, the rug gets pulled out from under you. And so then I was assigned intelligence again. And that's kind of where I found my space. I knew how to work intelligence and espionage. Worked undercover, and it was a good fit.
So were you based out of D.C. when you once were assigned to intelligence?
No, I never went to headquarters. I never wanted to go to headquarters, to be truthful, especially as I got to know the work. The real work is in the field offices, not sitting on your butt in Washington, D.C. So,
don't tell headquarters that.
I know. But it's the truth, and every field agent really knows it. And the FBI has a really bad habit, as does most government offices, really. They just promote. If you're not really competent in your job where you are in the field, you're moved to headquarters. And so it's that Peter principle. These are good agents, but I mean, they just never really found where they fit. And I didn't want to be a part of that because I knew what I was doing in the field. I was actually out there meeting people on the street where things were happening. And that's what excited me.
This is just my observation. I won't associate it with you, but I've noticed over the years there is a lot of tension between headquarters and field offices, especially when it comes to turf wars and who's handling what. And I wonder if there's some latent insecurity that comes from headquarters because of those factors that you just mentioned.
Well, yeah, I mean, everybody. And the thing is, once you get on that career path, and we've had some amazing people that rose through the ranks.
Mm-hmm,
I mean,
sure.
I would freely admit that. But they were the ones that broke out of the mediocrity that sometimes settles in a place like headquarters. And they were great, or at least most of them were. But really, there was a change after 9/11, because before then, the field offices, at least in my tenure, I know it's gone back and forth over the decades, but during my tenure, when 9/11 happened, headquarters closed ranks, and they just said, we are no longer going to really allow the field offices to just run with their cases. Everything has to be filtered through HQ. And I can see why, because there were intelligence gaps, and one field division didn't really know what the other field division was doing. So that was the right thing to do. I'm not criticizing that, but it did become very centralized.
Sure. It also, I know we're jumping ahead a little to 9/11, but it's a fascinating era because, I think at that point, CT counterterrorism wasn't the priority that it was on September 10th, 2001. It wasn't the priority that it became on September 12th, 2001, right?
Exactly.
And
right.
so where you were working, I'm guessing was still, like mainline counterintelligence, like foreign governments, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I absolutely was. The thing that is the similarities really are you're dealing with intelligence. Now, whether the intelligence is from Russia or China or a foreign government, the intelligence is from a terrorist cell. It's all about collecting information from the bad guys. And the thing with criminal work, and I'm not denigrating that either, but it's different because with criminal work, you've got an issue, you've got white collar crime, you've got something that happened, something concrete that you can go after. In intelligence work, you don't know. It's like finding, a needle in a haystack. And the only way you can really do that is by having good sources. And in intelligence and counterintelligence and counterterrorism, unless you have the skill to develop sources and informants, you're dead in the water. You're always going to be running up leads from another agent who can develop those sources.
So let's back up to when you got into intelligence and counterintelligence. Your career spanned some of the high-profile counterintelligence cases like Robert Hansen and Aldrich Ames. Yeah. So you were probably around for when those were starting to go. And I know field office may not have touched those cases, but let's talk about your trajectory in counterintelligence during this amazing era of the Soviet Union is falling, and there's this new era of Boris Yeltsin. You were there for Gorbachev and late Soviet Union. And what was that era like? That early late Soviet Union.
In 1985 was known as the year of the spy. We caught so many particularly Russian spies in this country. And then, of course, those involved in espionage, like the names you just mentioned.
Yeah.
So that was...
Listeners to this show may know we talked to one of them. His name's Jack Barsky, so make sure to check out that episode.
Okay, do. So it was an exciting time because there was a lot of adrenaline. And for years, FCI, we called it in the old days, foreign counterintelligence. Now it's just counterintelligence or intelligence work. It was always a priority, but nobody knew it because we couldn't talk about it. And so if I were interviewed, if it was right now and I was working it, what would I really be able to say to you? I can talk about a case that happened 10, 20 years ago, but we didn't talk about those cases. And so the public, even our other agents, didn't really know what we were doing because we couldn't really, it's not like you go across the street to a bar and talk about your case. You just couldn't do it, whereas the guys that working some of these other criminal matters could. And that's fine because it wasn't classified. But people, even within the Bureau, didn't really understand the importance of classified information. And I tell you, I've learned over the past few years, a lot of people don't understand what classified information really is. It's not somebody just, I've declassified it in my head. It's not that. It's a strict adherence to laws and guidelines that have been set out a long time ago. And it's usually the Office of Origin that has the opportunity or the option to declassify something, not somebody else because they think it's not important. So that I've noticed that I want to say the crap, but the junk that's come out in commentaries about, what classified information is or is not is just somebody's idea of, I don't know, fantasy world, or they've read too many books.
Well, yeah. But also, do you think, one of the narratives out there is that the government has an overclassification issue, right? Too many things are being classified. Obviously, during the height of the spy years in the 90s, and, I think there's a way to back into that question. Let's circle back to that, because I think a good question that is often overlooked in the discussion of intelligence and counterintelligence, like, what are you protecting against? Like, for many people, it looks like just a big game, right? Someone's trying to get something and you're trying to stop it. Like, what's the actual danger and malice that can happen from a successful intelligence agent from a foreign government? We know what it looks like with the terrorism cell, but from a foreign government, what are we trying to prevent?
Well, so specifically what I worked was Chinese and Russian intelligence. And the spies that these countries would, bring into the United States would be vetted to some degree by State Department. So if they had been flagged in another country as being identified as a hostile intelligence officer, then we would deny their entry. But a lot of times we didn't know. And a really good spy isn't detected. That's sort of the idea, right? That's why they're good spies.
Right.
So when they come into this country, a lot of times they will be attached to embassies or consulates, right? And
those are the legals.
Those are the those are the legals. The illegals, which you're referring to, are those that come in under the guise of being a student, being a business person, being a part of a delegation. We opened up so much in the way of commerce and business that we were doing business a lot. We were going over there, they were coming over here. The problem that we found is that, of course, these are very good ways for sleepers to come in, for illegals.
Yeah.
Illegal, I just want to make that point, is an illegal is somebody who will come into this country and assume an identity, an American.
Yeah, there's no diplomatic cover. Yeah.
No, none at all. A non-official cover. A knock is what the another term. Mm-hmm. So these are the folks that are really hard to pinpoint because they speak excellent English. Did you ever watch the show The Americans?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was really well done. And I'm a critic of most things that are,
I figure you would be, yeah.
World and counterintelligence, but that was really well done. Where these people were embedded into American society. Now, one couple wouldn't do all the things they did, but a lot of different couples around a lot of different areas would do the things that they did. And so it's a matter of just embedding yourself into American society, targeting the company or the technology or the entity that the foreign government wants you to, and it's just maneuvering your way in. So those people are very hard to identify, very hard. And I don't want to say impossible, but they're difficult. And you don't want to create paranoia. You don't want to go around saying, well, you gotta, because the thing is they speak excellent English and they have the backstopping. To you and I, they look like American citizens born in Topeka, Kansas. We just would never know. Mm-hmm. So the ones that I worked primarily were attached to consulates, and they were the legals, as you say. So Igor, whatever, I'll use just a name, would come in. Sure. And my job and my fellow colleagues was to determine whether or not the guy was really legitimate. Because the thing is with a person who's operating here legally under diplomatic cover is that they can't be arrested. They can't be found guilty of a crime. They have diplomatic immunity. So they're just skirted out of town. And we'll go back to Moscow or Beijing or wherever it happens to be. So they don't run the risk of getting caught. Well, they can get caught, but not arrested. So my job was to find out if these diplomats were really doing what they should be doing, or were they here just to make contacts and inveigle their way into other areas.
It seems like the legals, the ones with diplomatic cover, may be the more dangerous ones because they're the ones who, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're the ones whose main job is to recruit people
Yes.
who are already United States citizens, who are already here, who are already inside the government, or who can give secrets about weapons or war plans or whatever, which is, I'm guessing, what most of them were after at the time, right?
Well, yeah. And Dan, you're absolutely right. They didn't have as much to lose because they couldn't be arrested. I mean, they had total diplomatic immunity. They could basically do whatever they wanted. They could shoplift. There was nothing we could do about it. I mean, what they can get away with, it was truly amazing. Talking about the targets, the type of information that these foreign governments want, and primarily comes down to three areas. And you would expect military. I mean, they want military information. And there's a lot of military, obviously, contractors around the country, a lot of them in the Silicon Valley. The second is economic intelligence. Anything that they can get and steal. China was brilliant at this. The reason they're so far advanced technically is they've stolen everything.
Yeah.
So in a way, so economic intelligence. And the third one is political intelligence. And I never really thought about this before until I had an intelligence officer assigned to the consulate who was definitely interested in political. And he canvassed, there's a lot of think tanks around the country as well, and particularly in the Bay Area. So and the thing is, a lot of times when there's a summit or, some diplomatic meeting, international meeting, the administration will reach out to experts and scholars in different areas to get briefed. And then they go to these meetings more aware of what's really going on in the world. And that's what the political officers do. Say, this is the kind of information that the U.S. government is looking for, to give the other side a heads up to what to expect. So those were really the three primary areas that these spies who were sent into the country really look for. Those were the areas they really focus on.
Yeah, and I know especially with the Chinese, a lot of the economic information, but, of course, I believe it was during the Clinton administration, it came out that there was fairly large breach of data when it came to missile technology, right? And and that helped.
Well,
a lot of the Chinese technology, the way the Chinese military is right now, and the reason it's so powerful, is because of everything they got from us.
They stole it from the U.S. And the thing that was really frustrating from an agent's point of view is that particularly this happened with a Chinese national who was in the United States, and I can't remember, I think he was on a work visa. And so without giving a lot of specific details, we knew the guy was stealing economic information. The company alerted us to it. And we went in there. They just had suspicions just because we had talked to the company. We had told them what they're looking for. They sort of matched up the activities of one of these Chinese, work visa people. And we knew what they were taking. And we actually caught them at the airport taking the technology. At that time, it would be USB drives and that kind of thing. They would just slip in their pocket and walk onto a plane. We caught them. And the company refused to prosecute. Because it was more important to them that their stockholders didn't get skittish, that they didn't see this company as leaky, as somebody who couldn't really deal or keep their proprietary information where it should be. So talk about frustration. I mean, this is what we do. We try to keep the American secrets, whether it's economic or political or military, safe. And then for them to sort of just flip us off like that. I remember it's like, I don't think I can work Chinese intelligence anymore. And it goes right up to the administration, whoever it is. And I'm not saying it was Clinton or any, I'm not even pointing out a president.
That happened to happen during
across the board that the presidents of this country would just turn a blind eye because it was more important to keep diplomatic relations open. So, we just had this rock in a hard spot of where we were trying to do our job. But if you don't get the attorney general behind you, the president behind you, what are you going to do?
Absolutely. Especially, with China, which is over the decades become increasingly an important economic partner, right? Like, so the diplomatic balance is even more like, how do you actually, you talk about how you caught you caught this person. How do you catch a spy, right? How do you actually do it?
It's not easy. The thing, and I mentioned this earlier, that unless you know how to develop sources, unless you can develop trust within the community. So let's just say it's a business or a company. You go to them and you explain, what your mission is. You identify the people who your spy. Well, the first thing is to identify the spy, to identify them as truly what they are, that they're not
How do you do
there.
that?
Well, it's actually fairly easy. I say that, but it takes time and it takes persistence. It takes focus. What I would do, it was get an idea. I would find out who their contacts were in this era and with this country, in Russia and in China, both, particularly Russia. The spy is usually male. I mean, they are just that kind of society. The women are used as sparrows. They're used as honeypots or whatever, but they're not given the heft of being an actual agent for the most part.
Even before you start catching the spy, how do you detect that there's a spy at work? How do you know where to look?
So the way it works is that I'd be assigned a diplomat, period.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would just monitor his contacts. Let's just say, for example, he was a cultural consul, there to promote cultural trade and interests between the two countries, develop sister city relationships, all that kind of stuff. Okay, that's fine. You would expect them to go into those communities, right? So what I did, and this takes time. When I say it was easy, I only meant that if you take your time and you pick through things, you can find an aberration, because that's what you're looking for, is the aberration. So let's just use Igor again. Let's just say he's the cultural consul, attaché, whatever, and he's doing a few things that seem right, schmoozing the right people. But then during some of these, these events or whatever, he latches on to somebody who's a think tank, a person assigned to a think tank or attached to a think tank, actually has a classified clearance, because he is the kind of person, she is the kind of person who's going to be briefing the president on the next summit. So you say to yourself, okay, wait a minute, this is a little beyond their scope of interest, right? So then I would go to that person and say, you've met Igor, what do you think? He's here for you. And I'd explain who I was. I never tried to lie to these people. That's just something I never did. I was as honest as I could possibly be. I told them exactly what I was after, and I asked them to be as honest with me. Some of them were not, but I had other ways of determining whether or not they were honest as well. So, and that's, again, it comes down to talking to people. And if you can't talk to people, if you don't have a personality that is willing to engage and be the kind of person that others do trust and want to help out in some way, and usually I did that by being authentic. And a lot of the agents I worked with would be like, oh, well, I'm sorry, I can't tell you this, it's highly secret. And it's like, that is not that is not developing the kind of trust you want to develop. I couldn't release classified information, of course, but I just try to work with them on it. And they would usually respect that. And the thing of it is, I had to determine if they were going to be more loyal to the U.S. government or more loyal to Igor.
So you're trying to double them.
Well, basically, yes. And so it really only worked if they weren't being forthcoming to me. That put a little red flag right there. Then I started wondering what that person's doing. Why is Igor so interested in that person? And why is that person not too eager to talk to me? Because I'm saying this is all part of, you have a classified clearance. There are responsibilities that come with us. And so that's, it's laborious. It's tedious. It takes time. These guys are usually here on a 4-year, assignment. So you use all 4 years. I had one case that lasted 7 years.
And they're trained to counter you too, right? Like, they have their tradecraft. You have your tradecraft, and we're seeing whose is better all the time, right?
Well, and it's so easy to think it's all technical coverage, and right. There were a lot of my colleagues that felt, oh, well, let's just cover the technical part. And that's as important. I'm not saying it isn't. But when it comes right down to it, it's nose to nose and knee to knee. when you
Yeah.
really want to develop relationships, because that is what we're talking about here. When you talk about spies and recruiting them, what is ideal is that you talk to you. For example, this person, I'll give you a hypothetical. This person I talked to who has a classified clearance that Igor is trying to develop. So what I want to do is find out all I can about Igor. What makes Igor tick? That's the key behind it all, right there. What motivates him? Once you can get to that, then you can exploit that. A lot of times, it's particularly with the Chinese spies, it was family. They were held hostage. That they're not about that at all, holding their family hostage. And the Russians aren't that far behind either.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so when you find out what it is, then you can work with it and decide. And the last thing you want to have happen, and it happened to a couple of my colleagues, they did recruit a Russian spy, and he was found out and sent home. Yeah, you don't want that on your conscience.
No. Yeah.
Ever.
I can only imagine, because at a certain point you become responsible for their lives.
You do.
Right?
That is not an exaggeration, Dan. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't want to be melodramatic about it.
No.
But you are responsible for this person's well-being. And that's where a lot of tension comes in between FBI agents on the ground, CIA, who operate externally for this country, and DOJ. You personally feel responsible for the life of this person. Handing him over or her over to somebody that is not in that loop, that hasn't developed the trust. I had a really hard time with that. That was probably one of the most difficult things I had to do. Because the point at which this person, if they're recruited, will travel and report back, and they'll become a double agent. And I never took that lightly at all.
Well, and the farther up you go on the chain for all those organizations, including the FBI, the more abstract the humanity of that person you're dealing with becomes. You know, they don't know them. They didn't work them. They didn't develop them.
They don't know. They don't know what buttons I've had to push. They don't know what motivates that person. They haven't looked into that person's eyes and told them, I can protect you. I can help you. I can make your life better. And then to have it turned over to somebody else. And I'll tell you, not always, but I preferred to just tell this person, just give us a data dump and forget it. Don't become a double agent. It's dangerous. It's very, very dangerous.
Is there a story that you can tell that what you would consider the high point of your career, or like the big case, the one that you could tell you would tell other people at bars that you could tell or talk to, you know?
Yes, well, Dan, I wrote a book called Secrets of a Strong Mind. And it's a lot about mental toughness and kind of the perseverance that it takes to keep going, the clarity, the focus. And it's sort of an amalgamation of maybe two cases, but it did happen. And in my book, I call him Nicholas. But I knew that something was different. We had gotten information that he was a suspected intelligence officer after he'd been let into the country. Another foreign government had said, listen, we watched him, we talked to his contacts, there's something not right with this guy as far as the assignment he was given. So I knew that he was going to be attending a conference, and I made sure I was there. And I saw him sitting there. And I stepped on toes and pushed old people away to get to that seat that was next to him because I wanted to sit there. And I just, how do you start a conversation? I always wore a wedding ring, and I was married, but if I had to bring a husband into it, it'd be one of my colleagues, right? So I never wanted to be that kind of message. So I sat there, and, it was a high tech. And he was supposed to be a high-tech intelligence officer. I mean, he was interested in technology, or that was his assignment, let's put it that way. But I could tell he just wasn't interested. And so, you have the breaks, and it's the time everybody comes together to schmooze, to network, da-da-da-da-da. He just sat there. And I'm going, holy crap, this is not going anywhere. How can I, he didn't really want to talk, and I didn't want to be too forward. So I got up for a while, noticed he never got up, so I went and sat down again. And then at that time, there was a book called The Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Yes.
And I loved that book. And I had a paperback with me because I didn't know if I'd have to sit around waiting for Nicholas. I didn't know. So I always had a book with me before the days of Kindle. And I pulled it out. I started reading it. And he was intrigued by that. And so he approached me. He said, so that's interesting. What's that book about? So we started talking. I couldn't have predicted that. That was just desperation, to be truthful. So I wouldn't have to just sit there and say nothing. But so we got to talking about literature. And I love to write. I've always loved to write. And if I could have been my first career choice, it probably would have been to be a writer. But I needed to make house payments too. So
sure. Yes. The eternal struggle. Yeah.
The eternal struggle. So we started talking about it, and I could see he was really animated. And the other thing he was doing, instead of taking notes like he should have been when these people were talking, he was doodling on the side of his page there, or his paper, how they give you paper handouts. Mm-hmm. He was doodling. And it was actually quite good. And it was just a little thing like a tree or an animal. I couldn't even remember what it was. But so I felt confident enough to ask him, well, what's that? What's that? So it looks like you're an artist at heart. And he said, yeah, it's something I've always wanted to do, is be an artist. I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. So then we got to talking a little bit more, not anything to do with his assignment to the consulate at all. Mm-hmm. But I could just sense this guy was not really interested in what his assignment was. And so we got to talking, and I said, well, I know somebody. Of course I didn't, but I found somebody who might be interested in your drawings. And because we got to talking, he said, I'd love to do a children's illustrated book. And he said, well, tell me about that. And he had a 6-year-old son, right? And so, but in Moscow. So it all kind of came together where I did introduce him to somebody. Gradually, we made that transition to where he just confessed. He said, I'm doing this because my dad was a KGB officer, and now they're called SVR. Yeah. So he was an SVR officer at that time. But he said, I'm just doing this as a family business. I mean, he didn't really admit, but he said, I'm in the consular, the diplomatic corps, because my dad got me there.
Yeah. And my grandfather's a cop, my father's a cop, I'm a cop, that kind of thing, right?
You got it. But it wasn't really where his heart was at. So that was somebody, but it took years to get to that point, Dan, of where he trusted me enough where he could confess a little at a time. And I had to keep bringing people in and I had to get legitimate people. And that's where you go out to the community and say, listen, this is what I'm trying to do, without getting a lot of specifics. But could you take a look at this guy's writing? Could you take a look at his drawings? Could you explain the business to him? And of course, Nicholas was indebted to me for doing all of that.
Sure.
And that's how you build trust.
And that is how you recruit agents. Yes,
it is.
Yeah, and that is how you bust rings. Yeah, I mean, you've led a fascinating career, and you worked in counterintel at a very fascinating time. And just to kind of revisit what we talked about a little bit ago is when the focus switched from counterintelligence against foreign governments to counterterrorism after 9/11. Did your job change?
No, that's where sort of a lot of misunderstanding. Even after the fall of the Soviet Union, and Gorbachev took over, there was still Putin in the background. Even at that point, he was still there. And so if you get sources that are deep enough into the Russian government or the Chinese government or any government, no matter terrorist or, just counterintelligence, you get past the gloss that the magazines and the TV shows or what passes for news coverage today, you get past all that. You get a little bit clearer picture of what's really going on behind the scenes. And so we knew that the apparatus was not dead. It was suffering a little bit of an identity crisis, but we knew it wasn't dead. So my job didn't really change that much. I still followed the Russian spies that we had in this country. We all had to work terrorism for a while because after 9/11, that became the sole focus. But I'll say the terrorists operate a lot like any intelligence apparatus would operate. They bring people in you wouldn't suspect. I mean, they're not dumb. So, people are talking about the Iranians. Oh my gosh, open borders, so many years. It's like, this has been going on for 20 years. It's not just something that happened over the past, 4 or 5 years. This has been going on a very long time because before Osama bin Laden, there are lots of others. So this ongoing battle that those of us in the intelligence world have been fighting for quite some time. And it amuses me that now suddenly, the Iranians, there'll be terrorist cells in the country. Well, guess what? These cells have been in the country. What do you think they're doing over here in the FBI?
Yeah, just over the last 6 months.
Yes.
and I don't want to get into politics, but the FBI counterintelligence priorities shifted from counterintelligence to immigration, or agents were assigned from counterintelligence to immigration, and now they've just been reassigned over the last few weeks to specifically root out suspected Iranian, or to protect against Iranian infiltration after the bombing, right? After the U.S. bomb. So it's like, it seems to be a lot of jumping back and forth, and shifting priorities, and
leadership doesn't know what they're doing. And for them, brand new. No, for them, this is brand new. Oh, wow. Now we have to worry about Iranian spies and cells, terrorist cells. Well, duh. They just didn't know what. This is brand new to them because they're new to the jobs.
Some of them
going on for 20 years.
Yeah.
Probably longer. And so for those of us who've been around for a while, no, this is not new. This is what the agents have been trained to do. And to be put and reassigned to ICE and immigration, that's not even the FBI jurisdiction.
No, it's not.
It's not our jurisdiction. We have federal laws that clearly denote what our jobs are, and immigration's not one.
And I want to talk about mental toughness and what you've developed over your career, and what, lessons that people could take to how to develop mental toughness and resilience in their life. But before we do, one last question about actual counterintelligence and the threats that we're facing. What do you think the biggest threats from that perspective are that the United States is facing today? What should we be protecting against?
The thing is, it's people like clarity, so they like to simplify it. And the news media simplifies these very complex issues. What we need to be doing is worrying about how foreign governments are infiltrating the United States in a lot of different areas. You can't just say it's just terrorism, because you also have people who are stealing economic and political and military information. They all do blend together. It's all about how well we have our fingers on the tab, or our fingers on the pulse of what's going on out there. So right now, if you listen to the news or read the news or whatever, it's one or two things, because they want to simplify. What do I think is the number one interest of foreign countries in this country? Destabilizing the United States. Right now, I'm in Europe right now. Believe me, America is not loved right now. America is not trusted. It's not trusted. So this is just the precariousness of where the United States stands right now. Not trying to make a political statement here. I'm just stating a fact. So destabilizing the United States, however they can do it, is a win for Russia, China. I throw in Iran or whatever. A lot of different countries will fall into that basket. So that is the biggest worry we have. There's a lot of different angles these countries can take.
They don't even need to be here, right? It's not like you need agents on the ground. Social media is
The word social media, what a joke.
Yeah. Good times. All right. So it sounds like we can all use a little mental toughness to get through this time.
Now, yeah. Well, you know what? I would say this. Mental toughness is believing that it will prevail in your circumstances rather than believing your circumstances will change. And so what I write about, what I speak about is it's personal leadership. It's not organizational leadership. I believe mental toughness starts with the person. You can infuse it into your company, into different areas within your company, but it really starts with you as a leader, as a person. So we all need to be resilient. I've done quite a bit of research on it. I tell you, one of the most fascinating studies that I've come across was done by the U.S. Army, because in the early 2000s, General Casey had a hard time keeping his soldiers mentally fit to go back to combat. And so he brought together a bunch of psychologists and psychiatrists. They put together the comprehensive soldier fitness program. And they identified like 4 major components of what it takes to be resilient. And number one is you've got to believe in the mission. You've got to believe in it. And if you don't, go somewhere else. You've got to believe in it. The second thing is you've got to have support of some kind. And a lot of times that's family, but a lot of times it's not. We all have sort of a mixed gene pool when it comes to family. So whatever that support group is. The third one is being positive. And there's some really good science behind how you can remain positive when feces hit rotating blades. You know what I'm saying? And the fourth one was sort of interesting. It's spirituality. Had nothing to do with a religion or being Jewish or going to a mosque or going to church or whatever. It had nothing to do with that. It had simply the belief that there is something bigger and better and bolder than you. And those were the four components that they really, mixed in to their resilience program. And so those are the guideposts I write about and lean on as well.
Yeah, I mean, and those are all amazing. It's strange. Like me personally, I grew up in. I say I grew up in. A lot of my career has been spent in media, and to survive in media, news organizations, like you have to be resilient, not just because of the stories you cover, but especially over the last decade, like just massive layoffs have been happening everywhere. And like, it's a culture of fear and, it's a crisis of leadership. And I think I've seen what you're talking about, resilience and mental strength at the personal level, having to almost be a substitute for it at the organizational level, right?
No, Dan. It has to start with whoever is in leadership. And it has to start there. And we're all leaders of our own life, right? So start there and work your way out. And if you can do good somewhere, that's just all to the more benefit.
It's easy to forget that you're the leader of your own life and that you write your own story, because often you feel powerless, or it's easy to put your circumstances at the feet of fate or the feet of others. But I suppose, over the years, because of my previous experience, I've developed a sort of stoicism of sorts, in the classic sense. Like, I always like to think everything that's come before me, I wake up every morning, my past is dead, right? Yes, now I just need to take the rest of my life and live it properly, right? And
exactly.
It's tough to,
Dan. Yeah. And that's where the positive thinking comes in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you got the crap behind you. We've all got crap we need to leave behind.
Your past is not a life sentence.
It is not. That's exactly right. So I'm with you 100% on that. But it does take effort on our part.
Yep. Now, LaRae, this has been an amazing conversation, and I really appreciate your time. For people who want to learn more about mental toughness and how to grow that for themselves, you have plenty of books out. You have lots of resources. Could you please tell people where they can find you?
Absolutely. I would love to connect with your listeners on LinkedIn. It's LaRae Quy, and that's my handle. It's my handle. It's LaRaeQuy.com is my website. And of course, my book. And I tell you, I will give your listeners this too. I have a free mental toughness assessment, and it's been validated by Arizona State University Department of Clinical Psychology. So it's not just me deciding, this will make you, more mentally tough, but it's a free assessment, and it will give you an idea of just the areas where, whether it's confidence or whatever. Surprisingly, lack of confidence is where most executives fall into. I'm shocked, but that is true. So anyway, I encourage your listeners to stop over LaRaeQuy.com, and it's right there. You'll find it. Just click on it and have fun with it.
The links to all of that will be in the description in the show notes. So check it out there, and you click on it. It'll take you right there. LaRae Quy, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being on Deviant Off Script.
Thank you for asking.
Thanks to everyone for listening, and don't forget to check out our Patreon. It's at deviantpodcast.com. If you go there, you can see all sorts of stuff about the stories that we're telling and have told since we started this show, all sorts of documents and videos and audios that may have made the show or had to be edited for the show or didn't make the show at all because we had to cut it for time. There's a lot of good stuff there. Again, deviantpodcast.com. Also, come find us on social. We're at deviant.podcast on Instagram and TikTok. And yes, given everything you just listened to, you may be thinking, Dan, isn't TikTok a platform for Chinese espionage? It might be, but we're still on TikTok at deviant.podcast. Until next time, thanks again for listening. Deviant is written, produced, and executive produced by Clark Goldband, Andrew Iden, and me, Dan Szematowicz, with original scoring by Shuvo Sir. Sales, marketing, and distribution support comes from our partners at Gemini 13. Deviant is a production of Cold Open Media. Bye-bye.